elections.
The U.S. Supreme Court today ruled against North Carolina lawmakers in a case that voting rights advocates say could have thrown elections into chaos across the nation. The High Court rejected a fringe theory that legislators are not subject to state courts when it comes to election laws. WRAL Capitol Bureau Chief Laura Leslie joins us live from the state legislative building with what this means for voters. Laura?
Lena, we're not going to have to redo any elections or redraw any maps because of today's ruling. It just means that in the future, the state courts will retain the right to throw out voting maps or laws that they believe violate the state constitution. After the state Supreme Court last year threw out voting maps drawn by the legislature, ruling that partisan gerrymandering violated the state constitution, Republican leaders asked the U.S. Supreme Court to weigh in on that decision. They claimed that a clause in the U.S. Constitution gives legislatures the right to make election laws without any oversight by any other branch of government. That's known as the independent state legislature theory, and it's considered to be fringe. With no overview by the courts, state legislators would be free to violate the state or federal constitution. By a 6-3 margin, the High Court rejected the lawmakers' argument. George Mason history professor Rosemarie Zagari called it a victory for constitutional democracy.
When the legislature makes laws, they are bound by the provisions of the very documents that give them life. This is basic constitutional theory. This is the basic framework of our whole system of Republican government.
House Speaker Tim Moore's name is on the case. He doesn't regret taking it to the U.S. Supreme Court.
While we would have liked to have seen, just an outright win on the case, we certainly understand what the U.S. Supreme Court, how they ruled on it and how it applied.
Moore said the outcome doesn't change anything for North Carolina. That's because earlier this year, the state Supreme Court, with its new Republican majority, overturned the earlier decision that started the case. Now, Chief Justice Roberts wrote the opinion today. He was joined by Kavanaugh and Barrett on the conservative side, and also by Kagan, Sotomayor, and Justice Jackson on the more liberal side. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote the assent, and he was joined by Justice Gorsuch and also Sam Alito.
Laura Leslie reporting live for us on Jones Street. Thanks so much. Tomorrow marks a really important deadline in this year's election. Going forward, you will have to have a valid ID to cast your ballot. If you plan to use a student or employee ID instead of a driver's license, you have to fill out an application. And the deadline to do so is tomorrow. This year's elections include races for city mayor, town council, and county commission. Your ID will also be required next year, of course, for the general election. If you miss this week's deadline, another application window will open in time to apply for the 2024 elections.
We had some big weather move through last night. The severe stuff passed us here in North Carolina, but the delays and the cancellations do continue.